Hi, I'm Kait.
And I'm Brit, and we're here at Old Fort MacArthur Days.
Old Fort MacArthur Days is a military history fair that ranges from everything to Roman legions to Vietnam War. And we're here to get accurate descriptions of the uniforms that people would wear as a collection for cosplayers, people who are interested in reenacting, and for movies.
Let's get started.
We're here at Old Fort MacArthur Days with some Revolutionary War reenactors to tell us what the average uniform for a soldier during the Revolutionary War would be.
I have the standard tricorn hat with, because the Continental Commander-in-Chief Guard, which is what this is, had the feather in the hat, kind of standard. They also had red waistcoats, which was they captured from the British, and Washington didn't want red, but they captured them, so they used them and had to deal with it. It has the buff trim, which is also what the officers had, but this was because it was guard. Other units would have the, depend on the state, they'd have red or white or blue, green.
All kinds of colors.
Yeah.
Very colorful.
Yeah, which made it so beautiful, such a beautiful battlefield, right?
Not an easy way to hide, though.
No.
Well, we didn't want
Luckily,
that.
that wasn't the way that war was done then.
No.
I'm portraying the Marquis Lafayette, and so I person I like, and also my ancestry is all French nobility.
Oh, very nice.
So it kind of works out. But yeah, so this is pretty much as close of an exact replica of his actual hat as that we could actually get, that I could actually get made. It's made out of actual animal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this one happens to be a nutria, which is an animal. They originally were made mostly out of beaver pelts.
Oh.
And then pretty much everything else, the officers would wear their sash, their sword as a sign of their rank. They would wear golden epaulets depending on what rank you were. Lafayette would have a star on his. General Washington had 3. And that's pretty much the uniform. Officers would also wear what's called a gorget on them, which is basically taken from medieval times, which big chest plate thing was called a gorget. And so it would just kind of made it smaller and more compact to still say, hey, I'm an important person, I'm nobility. What I would say that I've seen Hollywood do so incorrectly in multiple time periods, not just our own, is that they don't take the time to do the research. They don't take the time to find out, well, their buttons were this and their outfits were these and their weapons were these. They just kind of throw stuff that people would think they are, and it's like, well, you could benefit. Like the movie The Patriot with Mel Gibson is great, but there's tons of uniform stuff that could be better, and just, and Turn and the other things that are of this time period. You just see guys wearing all sorts of costume stuff, and it's like, well, okay. And all these uniforms are completely period correct materials, all real wool, and because so much of that time period has been lost, especially for Continentals, doing that representation, just because all the records have been burned or lost, or they weren't good record keepers so much. So it took a lot of research to actually just even get these to the best of our knowledge where we can.
That's what I love about reenactors, is that everybody puts so much effort into making sure that every little detail is right, and historically accurate. And I think that's one thing that Hollywood could really take and run with, because you guys do such a better job on a much more limited budget. Hi, we're here with Jason Malari, here to tell us about the uniform that he is wearing.
What I'm portraying is the Revolutionary War Continental Marine. According to the story that I have an account, was when the Continental Marines was being founded, the only color left over was green. So they went with that. Also, another story I heard was the commanding officer of the Continental Marines was Captain Nicholas, who himself wore green for when he hunted. Either story is great. Makes the Continental Marine unique in a way as far as appearance. Now, their role back in the Revolution was as Navy Guard, protecting the captain, and as sharpshooters during a ship-to-ship battle. Canteen, haversack, and this is the cartridge belt, or cartridge box. Colorful history of the Continental Marines, and of course they're the forefathers of the United States Marine Corps.
Is there anything that you see in movies or TV shows where this uniform is shown where things are done wrong? Is there anything like you would like to point out?
I have not recently. I haven't seen any like a Continental Marine portrayed in any movies at all, especially. But although there was an incident when John Adams was being shipped over to France, and that there was a contingent of Marines on there as they were being attacked by a British ship. But I did not see any green coats or whatsoever. So.
Then they need to put those in. We're here with Paul Luansky, a Civil War reenactor who's here to explain what the average uniform would be.
For the Confederate in the early war, they would have actually had something like what I'm wearing. The uniform was supposed to be gray, though early in the war it was actually supposed to have navy or light blue trousers like the Union wore. However, those dyes were difficult to get, so the uniforms evolved into an all-gray uniform. As the war progressed, it was difficult to get even the gray dyes, and so we saw butternut made it a beige kind of uniform. And North Carolina was fortunate in that they actually had woolen mills, and we could make our own uniforms.
That's
so
convenient.
I'm wearing a complete uniform that an officer, I represent a first lieutenant, and so I still have a uniform that I have the yellow at the cuffs, which indicates cavalry, but as the war progressed, those colors disappeared. You'd see just little touches if you could get them. Places like Hollywood, you tend to see very garish uniforms, and at the beginning of the war you might have seen those, but it made you an excellent target, and that was figured out pretty quickly. And so pretty much things started to tone down. The gray uniforms were actually very good, as it turned out, for battlefield, because they were hard to see once you lost the trim. By mid-war, men were wearing civilian uniforms that they could capture from the Yankees, pretty much anything they could find. That's part of what we try to represent as reenactors, and my unit, I might be the only one dressed completely in gray, and my grays don't match. I have one shade of gray here, my vest is a different shade, and my pants are a different shade. And sometimes I wear blue trousers and they're captured Yankee. So we try to actually show what the uniforms would have been like during the era. So right now it's about 1862, the way I'm dressed.
Right. Well, it looks fantastic.
Well, thank you so much. We try for authenticity. You know, I'd like to invite all your viewers to come out to any reenactment. We have a number of them all around Southern California, and of course across the nation as well, since I know your channel's seen, not only in California. We have a big event if you're in Southern California on Labor Day weekend in the city of Huntington Beach at their Central Park. And that's a big event. It's free to the public, so I'd like to invite anybody visiting Southern California or in the Southern California area, come join us, look us up, and have a chat with us in person.
If you want to go ahead and visit that site, we'll have a link in the description so that way you can actually check out how wonderful these men are. Hi, we're here with Catherine Lowe, who is a member of the 45th Field Hospital, here to explain to us what the average uniform for a nurse in a field hospital would be.
So the average nurse would have the same uniform essentially that a man would have been issued. They came in two styles. There is a top and a bottom. They're separates, and they button in the front. They're men's pants and a men's top. They also made them in a one-piece outfit that has no break. It buttons straight down, and it has to all come off. It is a coverall set. They would have worn wools with the coveralls or the two-piece, so they would have had several layers going with it. We don't usually wear because it's so hot in California, but they would have had wools also to wear in the field hospital. The uniforms are very particular because they're cut for men, and men are measured by the chest.
Yes.
And so when a man is measured by the chest, that means that he's obviously not built the same way a woman is, has a different size waist, and the hips are very disproportionate. So you might have a one-piece uniform that is incredibly loose in the top and still tight on the bottom because he would have tapered down.
Yeah.
It's also common to have sleeves that go very long and pants that are cut too short. One suggestion is that men sometimes would have cut the pants down so that the they could fit the leggings over the bottom of their pants.
Instead of having to fold them up.
Exactly, instead of having to stuff it all in there and having to tighten everything down. So some pants that you see are very short. They barely, hit the top of the boot. The other uniform, when women started getting their own uniforms that were cut, they had the buttons on the side. It was much more fitted to a woman. But overall, they had the same style as a man would wear.
If there is one thing that you could recommend to Hollywood or anybody making a video about these historic outfits, what would be one thing that you would recommend to them?
They're not pretty. That's the biggest difference. They're not tailored for women. They're not tailored to be flattering. It is true that women were issued makeup. They wanted a fresh-faced look. They wanted red lips and a rosy cheek to boost morale. One of the things possibly not commonly known, they made a lipstick to match the piping in the Marine Corps, the female Marine Corps suits, and it was called Montezuma Red. These women, however, were beautiful in their own way. If you look at any of the pictures of any of these women, they glow, and they have just such charm and grace that they may have fuzzy hair and they may not be perfectly made up, but they just radiate beauty. So.
We're here with Derek Vlasic, one of the British reenactors from World War II, and he's here to explain to us what the average uniform would look like for a British soldier.
Well, specifically I'm going to be talking about the British Airborne soldier. I am dressed how they appeared in North Africa. 1st Parachute Brigade fought in Tunisia from November 1942 until May 1943. In the beginning of the campaign, they were actually dressed the way they would have been dressed in Europe. By the end of the campaign, this is more warm weather clothing. This was issued for the tropics. I'm wearing denim over trousers. This is called an Airtex shirt, or sometimes they call it a bush jacket because it does button up. I'm wearing the traditional airborne beret of the British Airborne Forces. And then over this, if they were actually going on a parachute operation, they would typically wear, this is called a denizen smock, and you'll see it is camouflaged. It's in a number of colors. And they're actually fairly light colors. This actually was designed for the Mediterranean.
Okay.
But they did continue using them once they got to Northern Europe in 1944 and 45. This is called an oversmock. They use this when parachuting. So they would put on their regular uniform and the denizen smock. They would put on their webbing equipment, and I have that here. So this is your load carrying equipment. This is how you would carry your magazines for the light machine gun, your personal ammunition, and so forth. And then they were very concerned that when they were parachuting, that this equipment would get caught up in the parachute lines. So they came up with the oversmock. So this would go on over everything else, and then you put the parachute on over that. You have this weird tail thing. This actually snaps up under the crutch.
Oh, all right. Extra protection.
Yeah, and one of the funny things is that that same crutch flap is on the denizen smock as well. You can see it hanging here. You're supposed to wear it snapped up. For whatever reason, the snaps always broke and they tended to just hang loose. The Arabs in North Africa called them either apes or devils because they had tails. That's part of how they got the name the Red Devils.
Okay.
Also for the red beret. Well, we'll start with the Lee Enfield rifle. This is the number 4. It is a bolt-action rifle, 10-round magazine. You put the rounds in the top like this, and every time you fire, you have to work the bolts. Okay, what we have here is called a Sten. Nowadays, we would call it a submachine gun. Back then, they called it a machine carbine. This one's been deactivated because the real one was a fully automatic weapon. I can't have that in the state of California, obviously. What's very interesting about it is the way you hold it. So a lot of people will see this thumb hole and think you put your thumb in there, but you don't. This is actually just a way of reducing weight in this piece.
Okay.
Very simple, mass-produced firearm. You hold it like this, and in the front you hold it up here. You have to be very careful not to get your pinky into this section here. This is actually the ejection port.
You might lose your pinky.
The very first time I went to the Chino Air Show, a Canadian veteran came up to me, saw my Sen, and said, I want to show you my finger, because it was still munched. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about, since you had mentioned what do the video games and the movies always get wrong, you always see people in the movies holding it by the magazine. This actually is not the best way to fire the weapon. You want to hold it here, it's a little more controllable, if you hold it by the magazine as it's shaking in fully automatic fire, it might actually cause misfeeds. So you actually want to hold it like this. If you want, you can kind of lay the magazine across your forearm, and that'll kind of stabilize it, and that way you can either fire it from the hip or from the shoulder, and you see it has very rudimentary sight. There are a lot of things that Hollywood gets kind of close but not quite right. I've been seeing some film stills coming out about a movie about the Dunkirk evacuation.
Oh, okay.
And one of the things that I've noticed is that everybody seems to be wearing rubber-soled boots, which did not come out until after World War II, at least in the British Army. I've noticed that their trousers don't sit at the right height. In the 1940s, your waist was about here, and these guys are running around in these trousers that are about here, modern height, and that's completely wrong.
We're here with Tom Reed, a World War II reenactor, and he is here to explain to us what uniform that he is wearing.
I am wearing the standard tanker coveralls that all the tank crews wore, all the airborne or all the armored troops wore. It's a one-piece suit, really easy to put on and put off. Keeps your clothes underneath nice and clean. I've got on my standard rough-out boots that they wore. A lot of tankers didn't wear leggings with these because they didn't have to, and they were a big pain to put on and off. And a standard, what they call an overseas cap is what I have on my head. On this uniform, I have a 2nd Armored patch, which is the 2nd Armored Division, and its first commander was General Patton, and he liked to have the patch over your heart, so because your armor unit should be close to your heart. And that was something that was only done in 2nd Armored with Patton. And then my rank is a T3, which is a technical grade, which means I have I can do technical stuff like mechanic work. It gives you extra pay.
Very nice. Love when a patch does that.
Exactly, yes, just that little T. Just on the tankers, they didn't wear much stuff other than just their uniform because it was so hard to get in and out of the tank that anything they had on, even like a weapon, would get caught getting in and out. So they didn't wear much. This was about it. That's all they wore. We are part of a group called California Historical Group. It's a group of reenactors in Southern California here. We're always looking for new recruits. We always have a good time, and we have a vast variety of units that do a lot of stuff. So something for everyone.
We'll make sure that we put a link in the description so that way you can check these lovely gentlemen out. So if you want to come out to an event, you'll know exactly where to go. All right, now we're here with my husband, William Johnson. And he's going to describe the uniform that he is wearing, which is from World War II.
I am wearing a tanker's uniform from World War II, and behind me would be my loyal steed, a World War II Sherman tank. To work with a tank is really crowded. It's not exactly a padded, safe thing, not like today, so there's not much space. And so I would wear this padded helmet to help protect me from bouncing around inside of the tank. Everything's really hard steel. And then you wouldn't want to have much hanging off your body because climbing in and out of the hatches is actually really a tight squeeze. All I'm really carrying is a leather holster with my 45 handgun for personal protection. The uniform that I'm wearing is a more utility uniform. Working in a greasy tank, you're the crew member, and also you have to be able to be handy with a wrench if you have to fix something in a pinch out in the middle of the field. This was a nice utility green camouflage all-around uniform, but not everyone would be wearing this uniform in the United States Army in World War II. Also, tanks kick up a lot of dirt and dust, so I've got my goggles that I would have handy, and leather boots that were ankle high. You see a lot in movies and TV shows. They would add to or take aways, like the goggles. These are my Army issue goggles, but sometimes you'd see like aftermarket goggles or like Russian goggles, which you'd have to pick up from somewhere else. They wouldn't be issued as an Army equipment item. And shouldn't normally be worn with an Army uniform.
So it makes sense for somebody who's been in the war for a long time and collected things, but for somebody who's fresh into it, it wouldn't make sense.
Exactly.
Well, thank you very much. All right, now Zorg is the quintessential villain. He looks like a gangster, but also like a Nazi.
Nouveau riche dandy Hitler.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Nouveau